Good afternoon. I'm here with my friend. I think I can call you a friend.
I hope so.
Yeah, Michael C. Keith. Mike's a prolific writer. That's why he's been on here. This is your third appearance on
It is.
Poet to
It
Poet,
is.
Writer
Yeah.
to Writer. Let me read a brief introduction to Mike.
Okay.
Michael G. Keith is the author and co-author of more than 24 groundbreaking books on electronic media, among them Talking Radio, Voices in the Purple Haze, Sound of Change, The Broadcasting Century, The Radio Station, and others. The Waves of Rancor was a book cited by President Clinton for its study of the radical right's use of audio media. And the recipient of numerous awards in his field. He's a longtime professor at Boston College. He's semi-retired now. He's retired. He teaches part-time. I taught one of his memoirs at Endicott College, The Next Better Place, which was kids loved. And he is author of 14 story collections. He's been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. The latest collection that we're discussing is a short fiction, very short fiction. Let Us Now Speak of Extinction from the Mad Hat Press. So welcome, Michael. Always a pleasure to have you here. I was going to ask you, well, I'll read the Philip Larkin quote. I like Larkin too. Waking at 4 to soundless dark, I stare in time, the curtain edges will grow light. Till then I see what's really there. Unresting death, a whole day nearer now. So tell me, you deal with death rather humorously, and you know, death is something that should be obvious. But we're always trying to put it in the back. Are you obsessed with your own death, do you think?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure, and the older you get, the more obsessed.
Yeah.
Or at least I do. I know some people who have the uncanny ability to just kind of put it out of their mind.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing to do. Yeah, it's certainly a recurring theme in almost all of the short stories collections that I've done. And I can't see a time when it won't be something that I'll be concerned with and writing about. Even
I think we
now.
all are.
Oh, yeah.
But you take a rather humorous approach to it, don't you?
Yeah, I think maybe that's a survival technique. When you're faced with something you can do nothing about, if you don't laugh about it,
Yeah.
you kill yourself, I guess.
Yeah. But you do take a shot at all the posturing we do in life, and
Yeah.
you know how, you know, in the end it's for naught, right? It seems to me.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
It seems to be.
But I mean, you know,
unless
we
you're
do a lot of
religious
petty things. We are all guilty of that.
Oh, sure.
And
of course,
and then,
of course.
but you know, you sort of make light of that. And
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting to watch how people deal with something that's inevitable. There's all kinds of different posturing which make for very good observations in print, and you know, the whole concept of existence strikes me as absurd anyway, and out of that comes a way of looking at things which sometimes can give rise to humor and to laughter, and in this particular volume, I found that what I was writing had more lightness to it in the face of a very dark subject. And maybe that was a deliberate attempt on my part because it's not a lot of fun.
But I've always noticed that in your writing, the writing that I've noticed is
Oh,
there's a
yeah,
humor
yeah,
to it.
yeah.
I mean, in the short stuff.
In the short stuff, yeah. You know, people, when they see the title of the book, tend to go, oh, geez, I don't know if I want to spend time with it, but I try to reassure them that there's humor in it, and there's of course pathos, and I hope there's some provocative thoughts that engage people on the question of what does it mean to find yourself in a situation where you're nearing the end of your existence.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, you know, also, you know, in your work, and especially here, you have this certain sense of the bizarre, which brings me back to your memoir that you wrote 15 years ago or so, and that was kind of, your life was bizarre. Is that, you think?
Does that inform what I do?
Yeah, I would think.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Maybe you can tell the audience a bit about your...
Yeah, my childhood was really spent on the road as a gypsy with an alcoholic father who just kind of dragged me around all over the country from the time I was 5 years old until I was 17 years old, and convinced him to let me enlist in the Army. That was my strategy for breaking the pattern. That by that point I knew it wasn't a healthy one. When I think you grow up in a situation where there's a supreme lack of normalcy, it's going to stay with you in what you do. And it has stayed with me, although I've managed to live a pretty conventional, if not somewhat conservative life as a teacher for over 4 decades. The
beginning was yeah.
Yeah, the beginning was a roller coaster ride, certainly. It was something that had dark times, but it also had a lot of really light times, a lot of just plain absurd, ridiculous situations. And my father, who was this asocial character, he was able also to laugh and also see the absurdity in the humor of things. So when I think back at my childhood, probably the overwhelming, the overriding theme or thing that sticks with me is the times when things were maybe just so extreme or just so absurd that they were laughable. You know, that they were laughable, and that never left me. How could it? It never. I mean, we are who our experience as children. I'm not sure that any of us ever really grow up anyway, and in that respect, I didn't. And so when I had a child, and found myself a solo parent, the thing that I concentrated on more than anything was to create a situation of stability, but at the same time, laughter was quintessential, was to how we lived. And when you ask my daughter now, as she's in her late 40s, what stands out about her childhood, she says laughter. And I can't think of a better a better thing to have a kid remember was the humor in growing up and the laughter in growing up. So that I'm happy about.
Now, your paragraph, I mean, these are very, you have something as small as that in here.
Oh yeah, one-liners to one-pagers.
Yeah, just one page, but then you have other stuff. But basically it's very compressed.
Yeah.
But even though it's compressed, it's sort of like, just add a little water and it expands, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the idea. It's to concentrate thought, a message, a statement as effectively as you can, to compress something and make it really maybe slim in terms of wordage, but very, how would you say, wide in meaning. And that's what I like about the microform, the flash form. I'm not really sure the difference between flash fiction and microfiction. You referred to it as mini fiction.
I don't know, that's my own term.
But that's a good term.
Yeah.
I started off by writing more traditional length short stories, and then occasionally would write the 2 or 3 sentence piece, and then I came under the spell of Lydia Davis, who is one of the best short story and micro writers around, and have kind of emulated or picked up on how she tells a story, and find it something that I do with easy facility, something that just happens, as something that might be done in 5 minutes. Not all the time. Today I spent most of the morning grappling with a short paragraph, and I'm still not happy with it. But I'll go back to it, you know. But there are times when I just hit the delete button, you know.
Now, you know, you have a diverse group of characters in here, and often, you know, semi-comical situations, and you know, sort of laughing at the, you know, at the edge of the cliff, or doing absurd things. How many people would recognize themselves in this, do you think?
That's a good question. I haven't had anybody say, "Oh, that's so me."
Well, it is universal anyway. I'm saying general, but are there any? Do you've taken these from real life?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But they're composites, right?
They're composites. Many a short piece was inspired by something I read in a newspaper, or something I saw on TV, or very often from what I'm writing at the moment. A sentence, an observation will inspire my own original observation, and it becomes a springboard. And I don't know how many times when I was reading Lydia Davis' collection of stories, some 500 pages, it almost got irritating, because every time I'd read something of hers, I'd have an epiphany about something of mine, and I'd dash in and maybe not do the entire thing, but put the thought down and come back to it. I would say 50 or 60 times, or 50 or 60 pieces came out of the inspiration that her single volume.
And there's nothing, you know, like rarefied about this. This is very the common, you know.
Yeah, I would assume. I mean, I've talked to other writers, and you know, they take from their everyday experience. I mean, it's not to say that I haven't contrived something whole cloth or wholly original that wasn't from my experience or anybody else's experience, but within the telling of that, within the narrative of that, certainly there are experiences and observations that are universal and common to all of us.
Okay, and that's a great, you know, that's a mark of good writing. You know, we've discussed this a lot, but you know, you're a scholar of radio and TV, late night talk shows, and all that stuff, and you've written extensively on that scholarship. And I had noticed, I was looking through your website and all the personages you were with, Jimmy Breslin and all this, and but I noticed there was one scene with you on Walter Cronkite. You say there's a story behind that.
Yeah.
And for those who are too young to know, you know, he's the great CBS anchorman. That's the way it is.
I hope,
right?
even if there are young people watching, they know Walter Cronkite, but they very likely don't.
Yeah.
But I was teaching at Dean College at the time. There was a conference down at Brown University on college radio, and I got on panel down there, and my panel was the first panel of the day at 9 in the morning.
Where is Dean again? I remember that college.
Dean is in Franklin, Franklin,
Dean,
Mass.
Is it still there?
Oh yeah, it's been there for, I think, God, 130 years now.
Wow.
You know, and I arrived at the Brown campus, and there was a hospitality room in one of the buildings there, and I'm pathologically punctual, generally early, and I parked my car, and I went to the building, opened the door, and there's a long, stately hallway, and I saw a table with a coffee urn and pastries, but nobody was there. And I thought, well, I have carte blanche now. I can go in there and have coffee and pastry. So I went down, grabbed a cup, filled my cup, and as I turned around to reach for the cream, I bumped into somebody. And I turned around, and it was Walter Cronkite standing there, unaccompanied. He's just waiting for me to pour my coffee so he could pour his coffee. Well, growing up, Cronkite was a media god.
Like Morrow, right?
Like Morrow, and someone that I had hoped to emulate, because I went into broadcasting and spent 12 years on the air and radio. And so he was my hero, Walter Cronkite, and here I am standing, you know. And after I sputtered a couple of times, I managed to relate the fact that I had been working on an academic book that resulted in my interviewing some of his colleagues. And I related that to him, and it launched us into a conversation. And the next thing I know, we're sitting in big wing-back chairs, pretty much the way we are, and we're talking about a vast variety of subjects. And
and Walter Cronkite?
Yeah, me and Walter Cronkite. So I had this private audience with him for 45 minutes before other people started.
What was your impressions of him?
My impressions of him was that he was the person you saw when you saw the CBS Evening News. He was very frank, he was very forthright, he was serious but warm. I had asked him, I had told him that when I was a kid, I had seen him announce that President Kennedy had been assassinated, and that image just was etched in my mind forever. And then I couldn't resist the urge to say, do you feel that it was a lone gunman? You know, the Warren Report and all of that stuff. And he said, well, he said, CBS invested more money than it had ever spent in a documentary investigating that, and we concluded that Oswald acted alone. And that put to rest any doubt I had, because here's the most trusted man in America telling me that was his findings. He edited the program and appeared on it, and so I felt very privileged to be hearing something like that from the horse's mouth.
And Breslin, what was your...
Well, Jimmy Breslin was a different situation.
Who was in the Daily News and the Post?
Oh yeah,
and all that,
Pulitzer Prize winning author.
But he was a different sort.
Yeah, he was a different sort. Well, how I came to meet him was that I was his son's advisor at Dean. And on Parents' Day...
Was his son a lot like him?
No,
Yeah.
nothing like him at all. Nothing like him at all. A surfer, a character. Well, he was a character,
He was a character.
but he was...
He ran for the mayor of New York,
He
right?
did.
Yeah.
He did, with Norman Mailer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm sitting in my office, available to parents, and...
Well, he didn't run for mayor. He was...
No, he ran for, well, did he? Oh, that's a good question.
Because Mailer was running for mayor.
Mailer was running for mayor.
Wasn't he his campaign manager, I think?
You know, I thought he was...
I don't know.
Geez, now that you mention it, I thought he was running as an elected
I could be wrong. I don't know. Remember.
But
they were
in
connected.
any event, he just walked into my office and just, you know, sucked the air from the room with his personality.
Why did he walk in your office?
Because it was Parents' Day,
Oh.
and I was his son's advisor. So he came in to check up on his son, who sat next to him, and you know, was all tense for fear that I would say that maybe his son had more absences from my class than he should have had, because he was surfing and taking days off, and
so how was Breslin to deal with?
It was very friendly.
Yeah.
You know, he had a new book out called Table Money, and I had it, and he signed it to my mother, and he was very gracious, and so that was a fun encounter, you know, to be in the presence of someone who who had won the Pulitzer Prize and was known for his investigative pieces in the New York newspaper. Yeah.
Well, let's give you some time to read from this new book, Let Us Now Speak of Extinction, by the Mad Hat Press, available from the Mad Hat Press site and Amazon and all the other suspects, right?
Yeah, somebody asked me, let us now speak of extinction. Was I emulating, let us now praise great men? Wallace, oh God, now I'm drawing a blank, the person who wrote that classic book, but it wasn't a conscious.
Was it it wasn't James Agee?
No, it wasn't. No. It wasn't Wallace Stegner. Well, maybe it'll pop into the senior head. Okay, so I'll read a couple of pieces from the book, and maybe it'll give you an idea just what's in here. This one is called Troubled Sleep. In the morning, she says, the intruder reminded her of the Grim Reaper. He had this big sword in his hand, and he was holding it up like he was getting ready to chop us up, she recalls. Her dreams are vivid, and some like this one are just plain terrifying. It had my heart pounding because I thought she wasn't dreaming and that someone actually was standing in the doorway of our bedroom about to kill us. After a while, my eyes adjusted enough to the darkness to see there was no one out there. You're having a nightmare, I told her, but she said she wasn't. I got up to pee, and when I came back to bed, she was mumbling something about a giant spider on the wall. And that was taken from reality, as a matter of fact. This one, let's see, is called Consultation. I told my gerontologist I feel like hell in the morning, aches and pains in every part of my body. He said, well, that's you rotting. Terrible way to put it, Doc, I replied. He answered, yes, okay. How about this? Your body is undergoing a process called senescence. That's the gradual deterioration of every organ and limb in your anatomy. Better, I thought.
Not really.
I don't know that it is. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Oh, this is called First Trip to Orlando.
Okay.
It was just before sunset in the Magic Kingdom, and the hotel lobby was empty except for Tinkerbell and me. I watched as she fluttered around the concierge desk. She really was a sight to behold, adorable. I was intrigued, if not mesmerized, by her aerobatics and pixie dust contrail. Then she took notice of me and began to buzz around my head. At first, I didn't mind, but then it got to be annoying. I asked her to stop, but she ignored my request. Finally, I'd had enough and tore her little wings off. It didn't make me feel good to do that, but I was at a loss as to what else to do. My friends think what I did was awful, and now they call me Mr. Fairy Killer. I suppose I'll hear from Disney. They should train their characters to respect the space of strangers. That didn't actually happen. Okay, all right, this is the namesake of the book. Let us now speak of extinction. What is death? Asked the child. Well, it's what happens when you're very old, answered her father. And what's it like? After a long, awkward pause, the girl's father replied, Plato said that death is a state of nothingness and utter unconsciousness. Oh, I like Play-Doh. So death is like Play-Doh, Daddy? Yes, honey. Death is exactly like Play-Doh. And maybe another one here. I can find my let's see, this is called Animal on the Run. Nellie made a break for it. She'd had enough of having her teats pulled and squeezed. The old farmer just didn't know how painful it was, or he didn't care, and she simply couldn't take it anymore. So she ran as soon as she had the opportunity. And she planned to keep on running, too. So far, so good, she thought, as she slipped on and off the subway, relatively unnoticed. Do I have time for another? If I can.
We have.
Oh, okay.
We have over 2 minutes and a half.
Oh, we do? Okay, let me just see if I can find something that's brief and that I want to read. Let's see. It's all. I don't know about you, but I always agonize over what to read, and this is no exception. It's called Insomnia. He can't get to sleep because he keeps thinking it's a dress rehearsal for death. Finally, he succumbs, and in his dream, he's debating the existence of God with his friend. This business of an afterlife is foolish, he declares. And then he wakes up, grateful he has.
So, Mike, are you going to be reading anywhere else?
Good question. I don't think in the immediate future.
Okay. What are you working on now, just briefly?
I'm at this point reviewing the copy-edited manuscript of a book called Stories in the Key of Me, New and Selected. And it's being published by Regal House Publishing, and it's scheduled to publish in the spring of next year or the summer of 2019. And in addition to that, I've been working on a manuscript that may in fact go to Nix's Mate Press, and that I hope to have in some kind of form so that the publisher, Michael McGinnis, can look at it and maybe think about publishing it late next year.
Well, I want to thank you for being on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer.
It's always a pleasure. Call me back again. Okay.
Okay.
Good enough, good enough.
I was wondering why they took the keyboard out.
Yeah, yeah.